Welcome back, artsy friends. In this video, I'm going to talk about whimsical landscapes and how we go about putting all the pieces together to create our own whimsical landscape. I have a few samples of my art here to show you and to talk a little bit about the different elements of a whimsical landscape. By definition, whimsical means fanciful or amusing, which I just love that. It's fanciful. To me, whimsical art has a sense of spontaneity to it, and it's charming, and it's often stylized in its content, or maybe the features are exaggerated, like the flowers are exaggerated. Doubt that you would see any of these flowers in nature, especially all together, but when you put it together like this, it does create that fanciful, charming, whimsical landscape. So, as a general rule, there aren't any rules to creating a whimsical landscape, like there would be with a real landscape. For instance, I talked about Winslow Homer in my introduction, and here is in one of his examples. Whoops, as I'm like making my iPad go nutso. This is called Breezing Up. And Winslow Homer is an American painter. He was considered one of the most prominent features of American art in the 18th century. And this is what one would call a traditional landscape. It has the key elements of a foreground, a middle ground, and a background. And you're like, well, those are fancy words. Basically, it has something in the front, something in the middle, and something in the back. And when I teach art like this to my kids and I show them, I'm like, think about what's closest to you. That's the foreground. What's in the middle is kind of those things that are either on the horizon line or kind of out there floating towards the center, not necessarily the center of the paper, but something that's in the middle. And then the background's what's furthest away from you, what your eye goes to very, very last. So even though we're doing a whimsical landscape, we still want to employ those elements. We still want something in the front, in the middle, and in the back. Okay, those are key elements. The other things that I talk about in my whimsical landscapes that are very important are these three key elements: color, placement of the elements, and the size of your objects. Okay, and we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to demonstrate for you as well. So these are some of my older pieces. They're actually laminated color copies that I use in workshops, so they're not originals. But anyways, you can see I have exaggerated my flowers. I mean, these are what I call my garlic flowers. These are my eucalyptus flowers. These are, I don't even know, they look like little birds almost. But in this painting, I have overlapped objects, which creates that sense of depth, that sense of front, middle, back, and then the background. And then this one, it's very whimsical in nature. Little birds. Again, my little eucalyptus flowers. I've stylized these leaves. You know, you wouldn't see these in real in nature. And then all the little birds, they're very stylized and very simplified. In whimsical, you often want to take an object down to its bare minimum form to create that sense of whimsy. This one is one of my favorites. It's actually hanging on the wall in my studio. The frame ended up warping and I couldn't sell it because it doesn't hang flat on the wall. Too bad, right? So I get to keep it. But oftentimes in my landscapes, I'll include words and let that create the foreground. Like this one says, share your heart. And the flower is moving this way. So the placement of the elements is key here. I have, you know, stylized the grass with bumps. I have the word, and then I have the flower, and it's moving this way. It's creating that sense of movement. Because in the end, a good piece of art makes your eye flow. Doesn't like stay static. It's like you don't want to look at a piece and be like, okay, I can move on now. You want your viewer, when they're looking at your piece, to be engaged. And engaged for longer than a second. You don't want them glancing at your art and going, oh, that's nice. You want them looking at it and going, oh, wow, look at that. Oh, what, you know, why did you do that? And oh, look, those are hearts and they're floating off. And you want to be able to engage in a conversation, basically, with your pieces, especially with whimsical art. And then this is one of my favorites. You know, I love Scattered Joy. That's one of my tags. It used to be in my website. I believe it's it's someone's famous quote, scatter joy. And, but these are my sunflowers, and these are the garlic things and little doodads, because in whimsical art, you can throw in those little surprise elements of stitches and beach balls and stuff like that, because it's not real, you know, it's supposed to be fun and silly. And anyways, so let's practice some drawing, because that is one of the key things to being a successful artist, is practicing. I mean, you know, my son plays baseball, and if he takes some time off and he goes back, he's a little rusty. You know, it's not an automatic thing. Art is not. You have, I mean, a lot of people are given a gift. Yes, okay, you're given a gift, and you're given like a vision, but if you don't practice it, you're not going to get any better. So, but this is the part that I was talking about in all my videos, that for whimsical art, I often find that if I take that pencil, and my dominant hand is this one right here, and I make my non-dominant hand take over, my brain, it like frees up, and it becomes a lot more spontaneous and a little looser, okay? So it's okay. It might be a little wonky and messy, but you know, I've read this great book by Austin Kleon called Make Art, let's see, Still Like an Artist. And he said, wonk means human. And if it's too perfect, then it's made by a machine. And that is so true. I mean, we oftentimes as artists want everything to be perfect. It just makes me nuts when I have, especially adult students. I'm sorry, I know you guys all are adults watching this video, but my adult students are the ones that get so frustrated because something doesn't look just right. And I'm like, you're here in my class, and it's all about whimsy and all about being fun and silly. So don't worry about it being perfect. Mess up. You know, mess up and make something out of it. So anyways, let's start with some of the little doodads I do. So to make something whimsical, you're going to break it down in simplest pieces. So for my sunflower, for instance, you're going to have a stem, and I tend to do a large circle, and then sunflowers have that funky big center that's kind of layered. And then if you want the flower to look like it's turning to the side, you just do half the petals. You don't do all the petals. Okay. And I always, to me, adding just dots and doodads helps create a sense of whimsy. So there's one. Let's get another one in there. And how you paint these as well. Color is key in whimsical art, because, you know, we all know the sky is blue, right? God made it that way, except for when it's storming, and then it turns gray. But you don't have to make it that color. You can create your own landscape, your own color. So, and I have lots of sketchbooks, and I always encourage my students in all my classes that sketching is so important. I keep one at school. Here's some samples. This one a friend of mine made, and she wrote in this for me, but my sketchbooks are just full of doodles. Okay, this is Clementine, my bunny, that I've written a book about. Let's see, but here's, you know, whimsical landscape starts. There's some, oh, I love these little guys. Bird practices. They don't have to be finished pieces, and they don't have to be, you know, finished little drawings. In my sketchbooks, it's all about just working quickly and filling the page. And I call these my banks, okay? These are my little banks. And when I come down in my studio and I'm ready to paint, I go to my bank and I would draw an idea. And if I didn't fill the bank, if I didn't put all these fun little, I mean, look at this little fun thing. The little birds are catching the branches that are actually hearts. If I didn't have this bank full of images, then I would come down here and it'll oftentimes be stuck. But I love this because I'll come through and I'm like, oh, I haven't done this yet. And, you know, I'll create these little houses or something like that. So you've got, or I'll find cute little doodads that I like that inspire me, and I'll stick them in my book. But, you know, lots. You've got to fill your bank. You got to fill your bank. You got to practice. So let's practice a word. Let me show you how I do a word. Let's do the scatter joy. And what I like about it is it's a lot like what we art teachers have our students do called a contour line. And it's almost a continuous contour line with my left hand because it's kind of weaker. I'm not, I don't try to pick up my pencil. And so it creates more of this wonky look. Because if I did this with my right hand, which is my real hand that I use, I would try too hard to make it perfect. And I don't want perfect. I want it to be a little funky. So, like if this is a composition that I'm using, this Scatter Joy might be at the bottom. And maybe I would create an earth layer because we know that the earth is made up of all kinds of layers. So why don't we just put this layer in here? And then that gives me room to put more color. And then maybe for the grass, I'm going to represent the grass with bumps. I love using bumps. And then maybe I'll put some rocks in there, which are going to be represented by circles. And I'm not very good at circles with my left hand, I'll have to be honest, but I'll do that with circles. When dogs are barking upstairs. I try so hard to film when the dogs are sleeping because they're just little nutballs and they like to bark at everything. So anyways, I've got my layers in here, and so automatically I'm creating that, you know, formal landscape idea of a foreground, middle ground, and background just with my little silly layers, okay? Well, let's talk about some other things we can do to create whimsy. In your picture, when you're finishing it up and you're like, oh, that background has almost too much negative space, you can think about what can you create line-wise. You know, little ticks, little lines, stitches. I call them stitches. Or dots. Or hashtags. Or X's in a circle. Or like little beach balls. Create a bank of doodads. And when you finish a piece and you're like, oh, it needs a little something extra, you can take that Stabilo pencil that I love because it goes on top of paint, and you can add these little doodads and create a little bit more sense of excitement. So again, we're thinking whimsical and we're creating a whimsical landscape. Whimsical landscape. So let's try a couple other things. These are my garlic flowers. And again, it's just all about stylizing and simplifying and not worrying about it looking too perfect. What about this? This is a fun flower that I like to do. Definitely whimsical. So once you've practiced some of these like stylizing, and maybe you want to take a photograph of zinnias or something like that, and sit with it and draw that zinnia 10 different times, 10 different ways until you've got it in more of a whimsical style. That's what I do. I mean, I love Instagram, and so a lot of times when you people post these awesome pictures of flowers, I'll screenshot it and I'll figure out how to make it simple. But now let's talk about composition, because composition is key. It is key in any kind of art. I mean, you don't want to make bad art, all right? I mean, whimsical art can quickly go south if you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So I'm going to show you a few composition ideas. So not only do I fill my sketchbook with fun little doodads and cool flowers and make my bank full of ideas, but I also work on compositions, and I always have an idea or plan per se before I go to the big canvas, because I use a black canvas and chalk. It's not that easy to erase, and I don't like to erase because I think it kind of ruins the spontaneity of it. So let's start with an idea or two. And I'm going to show you a bad example and a good example so you understand. I'm going to do simple just lollipop trees first. Okay. So placement of objects is key to a landscape or to any art. Okay. It is very key. Overlapping is key, and placement of objects is key. Now, I hope you can see that what I've done is I've created a little landscape here. and I have movement. Okay, I'm just going to draw this. This is the movement I see. It's, you know, it's kind of going up and around, and it's really got a really nice sense of negative space, because that's what it is. The negative space is not bad. Doesn't mean negative. Just means what is around the objects, okay? And that often for me ends up being white because I like the positive space to really pop, and I really like white. I like what white does to a composition. But you want a really nice sense of movement in your art, even though it's simple and even though it's whimsical. Now this is what I would call a boring composition and not something we really want to practice. And even though it's an odd number, which is, you know, is a good thing to have in a composition, they're all the same eye level, okay? It's kind of boring. In addition, if you were to create a composition that looked like, and these are called thumbnail sketches, these that I'm creating because I don't want to make them as big as my book. But in addition, you don't want to cut your page in half either. So let's say you do. See how that's kind of dead middle? That's very boring. There's too much negative space that has no energy, okay? If I had thrown an object up in here and here, that would have made it more exciting. The other thing that's not very appealing is that they're all the same size. You want to try to create things with, you know, a variance of sizes. Placement of elements and size of objects, okay? So let's try one that's a little bit more of a landscape. This is like, you can overlap, and you can go big and short. You want to get stuff that's down low, and you want to get objects that are down up high. And then you can create a little birdie. I'm sorry, I'm switching to my right hand just because for these little birds. And like I said, an odd number is a good idea. Odd numbers are a good idea in art. But you see here how it has a sense of flow, and it has more energy, and it's so much more whimsical. Now, do I have anything in the foreground, middle ground, and background? Am I doing a traditional landscape? Well, yes, because I have overlapping, okay? You don't necessarily have to have the horizon line, something on the horizon line, and a sky to be a landscape, okay? So, anyways, I have sketched out here in a manner of minutes, right? I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've done 5 pages, okay? And I encourage you, this is your homework. Homework is fun in an e-course, right? I encourage you to sketch out ideas. Buy a cheap sketchbook. This is a cheap sketchbook. It's big. I like it because I can just throw ideas in it. These are more like what I take to school with me. My favorite are the black hardbound books. And I fill these up very quickly just with my little doodads and thoughts and ideas. But take a photograph of flowers or a landscape and think about how you can simplify that photograph. Maybe it's something that you love, like something at the beach, or, you know, speaking of beach, you know, we could do, if you wanted to do the beach as your landscape, think about okay, you're going to have sand, all right? So the sand line could be about like this, and you could put dots all over the sand or polka dots, but you could layer that with color, and that would be very exciting. And then what if we do a series of waves? All right, and layer those waves so that the cool thing is once I get these waves layered, then these can all be different colors, you know? And you want to try to offset the waves. I'm having trouble doing this with my left hand. My left hand's like, what in the world are we doing? And then maybe we put a cute little boat out here. I don't know. Let's simplify that boat. You know, like like the boat you used to make as a child. Oh, that sail's a little funky. Whoops. Okay. And don't sails normally have like maybe a little flag up here? And the sun can definitely be stylized. Please don't put a face on that sun though. Oh Lord, please don't. Definitely more dots in the sand. Like I would paint the sand yellow and then maybe put like orange dots in it or something like that. And then all these could be different layers of blue. And then you have your little boat. Maybe I'll make it look a little more 3D. But see, here we go. Landscape. You know, I had different objects. I had movement going on. And then when I add the color, oh guys, when we add color, it's just so exciting adding to the canvas. So I want you to grab your sketchbook and practice drawing with that non-dominant hand. Practice, practice, practice. Fill a whole sketchbook up. Even if you just put one flower on each page. Practice words. Practice, you know, love. You can do, you know, I love putting words in my art, especially in my landscapes, because it can be the grounding, you know, the grounding element for whisper or scatter joy or share. I love this one, share your heart. What else do I have? I have lots of stuff in my studio right now on the floor because I just moved everything from one room to the other. Gave my kids half my studio to be their ping pong room, and have they played ping pong? No. But that's life, right? I do like my studio being in this one room now. So you're going to practice and then, you know, get your grand idea of what you're going to do for your whimsical landscape for your final product, and have that sketch ready for the next video, because in the next video we're going to be adding to our gessoed canvas with our chalk, and we're going to be painting. It's going to be an awesome time. So thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to sharing with you all I know about paint and color.